Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome back for another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. Today we'll be covering the third day of the Shiva Akula trial, and if we're going to stick with the football analogy, and I said that the Tuesday's football drive, if you will, was comprised of just a 2-yard run, 3-yard run, but there was a touchdown for the prosecution. Well, let me tell you something. The offenses got opened up today, all right, as I think you may have surmised would probably be the case, but based on the way I wrapped up segment 2. Look, we had the West Coast offense today. No more conservative, run it up the middle, run over the right tackle, so forth and so on. I mean, we had everything imaginable, the football equivalent of everything imaginable. I'm talking about halfback passes, just what gadget plays, you name it. I mean, and we're going to get to it. Needless to say, the jury seemed much more alive, much more vibrant at just what all was transpired today. So now I mentioned that I mentioned that the prosecution, it didn't take a rocket scientist to see that they were asking other witnesses that they had called to give the good side and the bad side, both of Kelly Anderson as well as Miss Sue May. Now, and I told you that that's a clear-cut indication that they realize that they're going to have credibility issues with these witnesses. But let's start out with Kelly Anderson, because Dr. Akula at that time was extremely angry about the fact that Kelly Anderson, and this is all he knew at that time, okay, that she had covertly provided a copy of Canon Hospice's press release that he'd had assistance in crafting through that Florida firm that I told you about, that the prosecution not only, I mean, they threatened to bring those folk in and sanction them, one of whom is sitting throughout the trial. But at that time, that's all he thought that had been covertly provided to the FBI or the prosecutors, was that one little press release. I told you about the fact that they learned that there was a key tam lawsuit filed by Miss Kelly Anderson. We talked about the fact that that's a lawsuit filed in an individual's name when in reality you're representing the government. You can get up to 30% of the proceeds if you are successful under the False Claims Act. And basically it has to substantiate the federal government has been defrauded. Folks, that lawsuit was filed, according to sworn testimony today, by Ms. Anderson. She filed that lawsuit almost 7 years, 7 Y-E-A-R-S ago, all right? And she continued to work for Dr. Akula for 4 years after having filed that lawsuit. And during this time, he doesn't know what's going on, but in reality, she's been providing patient records to the prosecution team. And naturally, the defense side objected to these patient records being entered into evidence because no search warrant, violation of HIPAA laws, and I had mentioned to a gentleman that we talked about this because I knew this issue would come up, and I said, well, there is an exception to the HIPAA laws when you are trying to substantiate fraud. And Judge Afric did state, he said, all right, look, because things were starting to get topsy-turvy in here in that courtroom. Look, all right, the deal is that she was on solid legal ground for providing the prosecutors with those records prior to the filing of the key tam lawsuit. Now bear in mind, the key tam lawsuit was filed almost 7 years ago, okay, by her own sworn testimony. But the judge said, I'm going to have to research, or we'll have to research whether or not she was on solid legal ground in providing those medical records after she filed the qui tam lawsuit. So that qui tam lawsuit was the subject, as I would have expected that it would have been for a while. And I don't know, let me just say this. Bear in mind that this is being tried in New Orleans, okay? I've lived in Louisiana all of my life, and we're far from done with Kelly Anderson, but I'm telling you, I do not think it's going to play over well to know for the jurors what they're seeing is that for 4 years, this woman was effectively serving as a double agent, all right? Now, he was upset about a mere press release. Now he's finding out she's been giving the patient records, or at least copies of them, to these folks for all of these years. Okay. All right. She also sent an email to Dr. Akula in which she said, look, I don't want to do this, but I've got this other opportunity, and if I don't get $10,000, I'm going to have to take this other six-figure opportunity that's come my way. Okay? And what you got to realize, I'm sitting on the front row so that I can glue myself to this Elmo and look at these exhibits. And I'm reading down because it was an email exchange that, had 3 or 4 layers to it. And I'm looking at about the 3rd level, and Dr. Akula has put in there that, look, it is absolutely critical that we conform to this audit. It's very important for this company. Well, all I know is the next thing, and the jury may have been able to see that, all I know is the prosecuting attorney said, now wait a minute, let's just focus in on the most recent reply, okay? And what that one said is that Cannon's very survival may hinge on us adhering to this audit. Now I'm going to get to why that's so critical in just a moment, because that actually entails Ms. Sue May. But so she's standing to make 30% of what may ultimately be recovered through the qui tam lawsuit. She was very incredulous that the folks needed pay raises. And when she was questioned, but why were you so emphatic about these pay raises? She said, because they deserved them. Now I'm going to have to start looking at my notes a little bit more thoroughly now because I do not want to leave anything off with regard, or anything major off with regard to Miss Anderson. And then we're going to move on to Miss May. It appears that she began discussions with the FBI in November of 2017. She went out of her way when asked, did you contact the FBI? She said, I did not contact the FBI. I did not contact, she testified that despite what all she had seen, she never contacted any law enforcement. And I'm sorry, it appears that, my bad on that. I have September of 2018, apparently is when the FBI, because she was asked, were you ever asked by the FBI to wear a wire? No, I was not asked to wear a wire by the FBI, but in September of 2018, they had me make a phone call to Dr. Akula. And they said, and this phone call was recorded, right? Yes, this phone call was recorded. I had to call in for a number after which they would begin the recording. Now, the defense wanted to play the recording, okay? The prosecution side said, we object. Now, why would you object to the playing of this recording? After all, the whole purpose of doing the taped phone call is to gather evidence, right? Seems kind of odd that you would object to the playing of the phone call. Y'all were the ones who set this up. Now all of a sudden you don't want it played? And the reason that they did not want the recording played is because they asked her on the stand, did Dr. Akula say, look, it is absolutely critical that, because she was going to call and say that, look, oh, the FBI is going to come in and started talking with me about this. And his response was, look, just tell the truth and we'll end up being fine. Just tell them the truth. And she said she didn't recall him saying that. And they said, well, would it refresh your memory if we play the call? And like I said, the prosecution objected. They played the call, and guess what? That's exactly what Dr. Akula said. I don't think we have anything to worry about, but when you're talking with the FBI, just tell them the truth, okay? Just tell, I have it circled in big letters here, just tell them the truth, okay? And I put a notation here that 1:56 p.m., she gave testimony that she was, quote, shaken. Lord. They asked about where, I guess that was the results of the finding of one of the audits. It caused her to shake and were below average. And she said that things were trending in the right direction until the FBI phone call, okay? And they asked her specifically, because she was apparently pretty doggone knowledgeable about hospice care and things of that nature, and they said, well, what was the big issue? And she said that, well, Dr. Akula always wanted, it was 15 bed, and the 15 beds were to be filled at all times, and I did not think that was possible, but he would not listen to me, okay? Now they wanted to also emphasize that, hey, have you been promised anything out of your QTAM lawsuit? And she said, no, you have no assurances that you're going to get anything. As I said, it was filed almost 7 years ago. Now, a search warrant was served for obtaining some records in April or May of 2018, according to her testimony, and she testified that Dr. Akula knew of it at the time of the phone call. Now, I want to move on to Sue May. Sue May was the one who Dr. Blaylock had said had a lackadaisical management style, and you know, once again he was asked, give us the good side and the bad side of Sue May, all right? Sue May, remember I said that I had in my notations that she had pled guilty to something? Well, here's that something. It turns out that Sue May, by her own admission and guilty plea, and is now under a plea agreement, and she's a cooperating witness, she admits she is the one who went in there and altered these codes, okay, to cause them to get higher reimbursement from Medicare, okay? She admits she is the one who did this, all right? Then let's ask this. They ask her, how much were you paid at Cannon Hospice? Her response, $140,000 a year, okay? And from what I have on my notes here, it appears that on October the 13th, 2017, is the date she began to start falsifying these codes, okay? Going back to that email, all right, remember the email that I talked about? Because they asked her point blank, did Dr. Akula instruct you to go in and alter these codes? And she said, quote, not directly, unquote. All right, and I want to go back to that email that I talked about. I think that just about anybody would interpret the email. Remember I said that he said the very survival of Cannon Hospice hinges on us cooperating with this audit? And like I said, on the third stretch of it, he made that even more elaborated. We have got to get this straightened out. We've got to cooperate. We've got to get this audit fixed. We've got to get our system fixed. Our very survival hinges on it. She apparently took that to mean we're in dire straits and I got to start doing some codes, okay, to make sure we stay afloat. Well, you know, $140,000 a year salary, yeah, I can see where, you know, I can't have all this vanish from me. You know, I'll do whatever I got to do in her own mind to prop it up. Now, this is a key prosecution witness, okay? Now, with regard to the plea agreement, there's just no easy way to say this. Mr. Akula's key attorney, and I'm going to call him Mr. David because I don't like to mispronounce people's last names. In general, he's done a very admirable job, but he had a screw up today, and there's just no other way to say it. When he had her on the stand, he said, now, you are under a plea agreement under which you can face severe penalties if you do not tell the truth. Correct? That is true. And the truth is whatever the assistant district attorneys tell you the truth is. And his voice inflection was pretty strong. Now, Mr. David is from Columbus, Ohio, okay? He talks a little fast. Now, as a former auctioneer, I'm capable of talking fast too. We'll probably have to gradually ingratiate him to the southern way of doing things. We do it a little bit slower, little bit more of a drawl, okay? So I think the emphatic nature in which he said, and I want to repeat it again, and the truth is whatever the assistant district attorneys have told you the truth is. Well, she took exception to that, and I don't blame her. And she said the truth is the truth. And at this point, Judge Afric felt like a need to get some clarity here, and he told the jurors that, look, the truth is the truth. It's not what the assistant district attorneys tell is the truth, all right? Now, there was a recess taken shortly thereafter. I immediately leaned over to, this was the second it came out of his mouth, I leaned over to Belinda Parker Brown, who was seated to my right, and I said he was way out of line with that because common sense ought to dictate. And look, he's a good attorney, no question about it, but I'm going to attribute it to a little bit of Yankee. We say things fast up there, and sometimes maybe we say them without thinking. There's only one instance, so everybody gets a pass on one. All I can tell you is the judge asked for a recess, or said we're taking a recess. Supposed to be 15 minutes. This was shortly after all this. He didn't do it immediately after, and I'm thinking that might have been, hey, I don't want to just publicly say, look, man, you're going to cool it. But at any rate, the 15-minute recess wound up being about 30 minutes. When everything reconvened, the first thing that Mr. David did was to say, well, first of all, I need to begin by apologizing to the court as well as to the jurors for my commentary, and what we're going to do is we're going to read that portion of the plea agreement with regard to your testimony. He did so, and she said that is exactly what I agreed to. But you know, I said all that just to say that this was a screw-up on the part of Dr. Akula's lead attorney. But it changes not the fact one iota that one of their most key witnesses, you know, $140,000 a year. Look, how many on that jury do you think are making $140,000? Okay, how many? All right, they know about the codes, don't they? All right, and when she was asked, did Dr. Akula instruct you to do this? Not directly. This is not a good witness, okay? Any way, shape, or form, this is not a good witness, all right? And yet she is an absolutely critical prosecution witness. Do you see now why I told you it didn't take a genius to see they were trying to smooth it over about the good side and the bad side of Miss May? I want to move on to what was the surprise of the day. And give me just a moment to organize. Okay, here we go. And that was Dr. Akula's nephew, A1 Joshua Bruce, B-R-U-C-E. Now, he is Dr. Akula's nephew through marriage, and he now resides in Fresno, California. He actually began at Cannon Hospice in 2001 as a volunteer, and in 2010, he was named the administrator over the Gulfport, Mississippi branch. They asked him about his educational background. He said, well, I've got a GED. And I think I wrote that, well, he had a GED, and I think he may have taken some other training, some training courses. They asked him about his salary. He said, I made $25 an hour. Now, folks, that's about $52,000 a year. In fact, no, I think it's a little more than that. I was late in the day. I'm a CPA, and I usually can crank numbers like, let's just say 55,000, and I might still be a little bit low. That's not bad for somebody with a GED, okay? And he also stressed that there were bonuses based on admissions. Now, the one thing I want to really portray about Mr. Bruce is that, man, when he came in to testify, I don't have a care in the world is sunshiny, you know, happy days are here again. I mean, so smooth when he's under direct examination by the prosecutors. And boy, did his mind, it was sharp as a tack. Did he have dates and times and this and that down impeccably, all right? Now, he did say he wanted to take a course in the medical billing, and that his uncle told him that, hey, that's not necessary. We've already got that. He was asked, did you ever attend a Hawaii conference? Oh, yes. We were told to go to Hawaii and have a good time. And they did say that now there were hospice regulatory changes were discussed in this conference. The picture that's trying to be painted there, and you can tell now that every word he's going to say is going to be adverse to his uncle, is that, oh man, we just lived it up in Hawaii. Do you know how many such, that's why Hawaii exists. You know, that's supposed to be some huge sin, you know, having a conference in Hawaii. But I know what he wanted to portray is that, well, we just lived it up, you know. That was the purpose of that question by the prosecution. He also said that, well, once the search warrant got served, we had to get Raj, and forgive me, there's another individual, and I could not follow the name, but it's another family member. Oh, we had to escort that. They had to go. We had to get them back to India. Well, why was that? Well, Dr. Akula was sponsoring their visas, and they had not fulfilled getting their work visa. Now, they were pharmacists in India, and he did admit, just as has been testified by others, that Raj is very, very little English. And he also said that on Tuesday mornings we had these marketing meetings. Dr. Akula would show up at 10:05, almost with exact precision. We talked about census figures, getting admissions up, this, that, and the other. He also said that Dr. Akula, that when it came time for recertification, which would be every 6 months, I know that from my own mom having been through hospice, according to his testimony, Dr. Akula made it clear, we will get them recertified. And he said, we didn't turn any patient down, okay? Now, he emphasized that some of the nurses over which he saw became disturbed by this, and he said this was the rule. If you were going to decertify somebody, you had to personally call Dr. Akula and apprise him of it and get his okay. and I can only assume that a few times they didn't, maybe more than a few, I don't know, they didn't get the okay. So then they're calling this young man with the GED, and they're saying we can't deal with this. At least that's what he's testifying to. So he said, look, don't bother with calling my uncle anymore. Just do what you got to do. Okay. Now that was all upon direct. Oh yes, here we go. Here we go. It's time for cross of young Miss. Now I want you to remember, everything is calm, not a care in the world. Now works at T-Mobile in Fresno, California. Okay. All right, but now it's time for cross. Okay. Well, I haven't quite finished direct. I want to emphasize a couple more points. I'm sorry this is a little long, but I got to get these points in. They said, now you were aware when your uncle was indicted in mid-2021. Now, you know, that's a yes or no question, but I know what the prosecution's doing. They intentionally want him to say a lot more than yes or no because they don't want the defense team bringing it out. Better for us to kind of control it while we've got it, okay? Again, I'll repeat the question. You were aware that your uncle was indicted in, I don't know what month in 2021, but I think it was September. Your uncle was indicted in 2021. Yes, and I will say right now that I made a very loud Facebook post. It was very colorful, it was very loud, very lengthy, and I'm not proud of it, but it was a very long post, and I let my sentiments be. Now we're starting to see an elevation, okay? No longer that, don't have a care in the world, and I did start to elevate my tone, and I said some it was very colorful language, and he even said, according to what I wrote, at one point I may have said in there that I may have to go over and take care of these feds. Okay, now bear in mind, this is a prosecution witness, okay? And I'm thinking, okay, y'all wanted him to say all this? Because it ain't coming across good to me, all right? And so they said, well, why did you feel... I can only believe that this whole Facebook post was going to come out with the defense, and like I said, they wanted to control the narrative. So they said, well, why did you feel the need to make this colorful Facebook post? He said, well, despite everything that may have happened, we did good work. And he's starting to get more than just a little bit. We did good work, and besides that, this whole company, it was formed in honor of my mother. And he's basically like, how dare these feds, I'm telling you this. And I can only assume, well, I'll get to that in a second, because I haven't even got to cross yet, okay? So now we get to cross, okay? And they say, now look, you didn't exactly get along with your parents, did you? No, I didn't get along with my parents. Well, the fact of the matter is, Dr. Akula took you into his own home. Now you can start to see him starting to soften, like, well, maybe I better think about everything. And he said, yes, Dr. Akula, he did take me into his own home. And here to me was a critical, hear what I'm saying, a critical home run hit by the defense team. They said, well, you previously said that Cannon Hospice had we don't turn any patient down policy. You said that, correct? He said, that was our policy. We didn't turn any patient down. And he said, and by that is to also include patients who did not have Medicare, who did not have Medicaid, who did not have private insurance, and who certainly didn't, the indigents, did not have the funds to cover their cost. And he said it did include them. And he said, so all of those costs had to be absorbed from within Cannon Hospice. And he admitted they did. Let me tell you something. That's going to resonate with that jury, okay? That's going to resonate with that jury, and I believe it's going to resonate with every single member of that jury. It doesn't change the fact that if fraud was committed, But I'm just telling you, as I told you yesterday, decisions are made, verdicts are rendered based on emotion. That's going to strike home. I feel certain you will hear that come up again in closing arguments from the prosecution's witness, albeit the nephew of Dr. Shiva Akula. Now, next they said, now you familiar with Beth Seymour? Oh yes, I know Beth Seymour. And said, okay, well tell us a little bit. And he said, look, the tasks were becoming overwhelming and I needed a little help, so I went out and I found Miss Seymour, Beth Seymour, and oh, she was just, I'm proud of that hire. Oh, okay. Were you ever placed on a performance improvement plan? I don't recall. You don't recall having been placed on a performance improvement plan? I can't recall it. Okay. The reality is Beth Seymour ended up, now he probably didn't figure the defense team was going to bring this out, I don't know, but she wound up being his supervisor, and she is the one that said, look, we're going to have to get you up to speed, putting him on a performance improvement plan. Now, the prosecutors had said, can you explain why you left Cannon? And remember, he's gone off to Fresno and now is with T-Mobile. And he said, oh, burnout. Look, folks, give me a break, all right? He got madder than a wet hen about the fact that this one that he brought in has now become his supervisor and basically has said, you're not cutting the mustard. We're going to have to put you on a performance improvement plan. But bear in mind, he don't recall ever being placed on such a plan. So in the final part here, remember he stressed that the brother-in-law had to hightail it to India, okay? So on cross, they said, now you said that he had to go on over to India, all right? And they said that, were you aware he was in the United States in 2018 and was accessible to the prosecutor? No. Were you aware he was in 2019 in the United States? No. Were you aware that he was available in 2020, that he'd come back to the United States? And then somewhere along the line, he said, well, now wait a minute, are we talking about the first? He's starting to like convenient confusion now. Are we talking about the first trip over or the second? I'm asking you, were you aware that he was available on all these years to also include 2021, 2022, and even part of 2023? Response: listen, I haven't spoken with any of my family since all this broke out. More than a little bit irritated. So I feel like it was pretty interesting that Mr. Calm and Collective doesn't have a care in the world. Obviously he had been coached to control that temper, or he found a way to control that temper, let me put it that way. Because I mean, he was smooth as could be under direct. Cross was a different matter. And again, don't forget, it was the direct examination that asked him about that Facebook post, and he sure as blazes didn't apparently had some very unkind words to say about law enforcement and so forth. By his own admission, colorful. I always associate colorful as meaning an awful lot of profanity spewed out in that Facebook post. Folks, I didn't cover everything, but I feel like I've covered enough. Especially the length of this video. So today was interesting. I'm sure tomorrow will be as well. Right now, the judge indicated that it appears that this case likely will be going to the jury on Tuesday of next week. He did tell the jurors that we got an awful lot more to go. With that being the case, I'll just have to let you know there'll be a lot more to come. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will give you a recap of day 4, probably late tomorrow evening. Thank you for your dedication, and we'll see you again to present to you day 4. Thank you so much.